Hey guys, Miss Osuna here. Let's start off by creating this croquis with a shoulder that has a straight guideline, and then at the waist the guideline is tilted, left side lower, right side higher. And then we're going to build off our croquis. We know that the shoulders should be 1.5 head spaces wide, and drop those shoulders down just a little bit lower than that shoulder guideline. And go on ahead, put in your parentheses. They're very softly curved for your sides. So that waist is measuring 1 head space wide, and then put in your crotch or your hip guideline. Go on ahead and have a nice big curve on the right side. So that's a parenthesis facing left. And then on the left side, it's going to be a lot straighter. Now we want to measure to make sure that the shoulders are as wide as the hip. So 1.5 head spaces wide for the hip as well as the shoulder. Now find the center and put in your bikini bottoms with the frowns and a smile for the waist of the bikini bottom. And then we are going to move into creating our legs. So find the center of the right leg and drag that down till you get to 9. So it's a diagonal line. And then go on ahead and create the kneecap and the back of the thigh. Now we're going to do our knee to ankle area. So drag those long parenthesis shapes down. Make sure you narrow at number 8. Then do your diagonal lines for the foot with a smile for the toe. This comes down below number 9. Okay, it's time for the left leg. So the leg as you look at it on the left side of the sketch. We're going to have that leg be behind. So start with the toe. Going ahead and put the smile in the diagonal lines, hiding it slightly behind the first leg. And then we're going to drag out the thigh. Going ahead and put in your knee to ankle. And that will do it. Now let's put in our bust at 2 1/4. That's the guideline. And then we have our smile on the right and the left. It lands on our 2 1/4 guideline. And on the right side, going ahead and bring that up to the shoulder. And now on the left side, put in your straight line for your arm guideline. That's from shoulder to elbow. That's 1.5 to 3. And then parenthesis shapes for your elbow to wrist. And then we're going to place our hand. You can go on ahead and check out the videos that we have on creating croquis and croquis poses if you feel like you need more of an explanation. Place that second arm behind the hip on the right side of the sketch. Okay, it's time to move forward. Grab some tracing paper and trace off the entire sketch. This is where you can stylize. That means you can make things more narrow, and you can change your line width and your line quality at this point. So keep the lines that you want, get rid of the lines that you don't need, and maybe you taper in the waist a bit more, or maybe you make the hip a bit wider. Whatever you'd like to do, this is your styling chance. And you can make this sketch even more to your liking as you trace. Next, we're going to go on ahead and grab our marker paper, put on top of our tracing, and we're going to create our croquis with the dress. This is going to be a wedding dress, very, very tiny waist and a full skirt. gonna have a plunging neckline, and it'll have an interesting winged sleeve. Now we're going to design the upper portion of our dress. This is the bodice, B-O-D-I-C-E. So we are starting on the left high point shoulder down toward the navel, and then the right, so it's a very plunging V neckline, V as in Victor. And remember, we're keeping it light, not too heavy. Put in just the tiniest triangle on the edge of each shoulder, and that will represent the beginning of the sleeve, and then of course put in the bottom of our sleeve opening. Now we have a smile at the waist, and we're ready to remove the sketch from underneath and continue designing. Now let's go on ahead and move down towards the bottom. So we have smiles and frowns at the bottom of our hemline, and we're just adding diagonal lines on the edges of those smiles and frowns, and then we're adding comma and parenthesis shapes at the waist. That'll represent the gathers at the waist and then the fullness at the hemline. Make sure to make those lines uneven, some higher, some lower. I like to have the far left and the far right of our hemline end with a smile. Going ahead and erase the body underneath because the dress will cover everything. Next, we'll move to do the features of the face. And remember that the face is really created with a series of smiles and frowns. So starting at the eye line in the middle of the face approximately, start off with a frown for the top of the eye, and then a smile for the bottom of the eye. Then you can add a parenthesis shape for the center of our eye. So you can also add a frown above the eye for the eyelid, and then above that for the eyebrow. So really and truly, lots of frowns and smiles are used to create the face. And remember to keep your lead very light because we don't want the pencil to get muddy underneath the marker. The marker is very wet and it will drag that lead around. And we don't want that muddy, dirty look. more details on creating your face, you can check out our videos on sketching the croaky face. Once you've got the details down, go on ahead and erase as much lead as you possibly can, keeping the sketch extremely light and nice and clean. Now it's time to start off with our very lightest possible gray marker. And on the very bottom at our hemline, on the left and the right side edges of our smiles and frowns, we're going to simply put in diagonal lines. Push harder when you start and then lighter when you let up. Repeat that all the way across the entire bottom of our hemline. I'm creating lots of shadow on the frown portions especially, and those are a little higher than some of the smile areas. That gives the feeling of the fabric being forward and back. So the frowns are further back, and then the folds that have a more smile appear a little bit closer to the eye. So we basically are on the left side and the right side of our smiles and frowns, and that's allowing us to create a sense of depth. Now we're simply adding gathers at the waist. These are parenthesis shapes. So on the left side, they face right. On the right side, they face left. And just remember, use the tip of your brush. The left side of our sketch is the shadow side, and the right side of our sketch is going to be the light source. So we want the left side to feel darker. So make sure that you barely touch the page with the right side, and then press harder on the left side. You're just adding depth right on top of these parenthesis shapes. Notice that I'm making everything uneven. Some lines are longer, some are shorter, and I'm dragging some of them down, but they don't actually touch the lines that we created from our hem going upward, so that we have a nice balance. Now we simply repeat the whole process. We're going back from the shadow side and just repeating and adding more depth. So as you add to this, basically you can stop when you feel that you've created the depth that you personally want. Was the lightest bluish gray that I had, and now I'm going to move on to the colorless blender, and I'm simply going to blend over the original color that we've put down. Just make sure your blender is clean. I usually scratch it on a piece of scratch paper first so that nothing left over is there. You're going to start at your hemline and just go right on top of the ink that's already on the paper, and you'll see it starts to soften, and that's what starts to create the reality of the folds and the gathers and the fullness. It makes it look real when you soften and go right over it from the bottom upward, creating a feeling of gathered and folded fabric. Now we're going to work on the bodice. That's the upper portion of our dress. So I'm starting off by erasing even more lead because we really do want to keep this very light, using that same lightish gray blue color. And I'm just touching the outer edges. So I have added another triangle on the shoulders to give it a winged effect for the design. And once again, I am starting on the shadow side. This way you can add more shadow as you go along on that side, and then you also know to press lighter when you're on the light source side. Now that we have the folds and the gathers and the outer edges of our dress, grab your white ink gel pen, and we're just going to start to make a swirling pattern at our hemline. That's where we're starting. This is going to represent the embroidered lace effect for our bridal gown. I'm swirling and I'm keeping mostly heavy swirls on the bottom, and as I get up towards the top I'm gonna go lighter and I will make a sort of triangular shape. So the bottom edges are gonna be nice and wide with my swirling pattern, but then at the top it's gonna get more narrow. So you can see there that's closer to the top. These swirling patterns go to a more narrow feel, and then I've just added some floral shapes. I've also added a few star shapes on those outer edges on the left and the right. But of course, you can do any design that you see fit. Now I'm going to move on to correction pen. If you don't have correction pen, you can also use white acrylic paint with a tiny, fine brush. And I'm just adding lots of dots starting at the hemline, and this is just going to give yet another layer of depth. So I've created a pattern, and you can see here those larger dots I've kept more toward the outside, and I've made sort of a curved shape with those. Here you can see more closely the pattern and the way I'm making it. I'm just doing dots with the correction pen. And once again, you can use white acrylic paint and a tiny fine brush, a very small watercolor brush. So go on ahead and add whatever pattern you'd like. Now I'm just going to make a pattern at the very bottom of the sketch. So for that hemline, I'm going to make it feel like there's a nice heavy embroidered lace. All right, so I've gone ahead and added a little bit of background and colored her skin, her hair, and her face. And now I'm simply adding the same light gray marker on top of this embroidered lace pattern that I've created. So this will help to just add to the reality of the effect. So you're going on top of your embroidered pattern that we created with our white ink gel and with our correction pen, or if you were using white acrylic paint. Just be sure it dries. I waited about 5 minutes, and now I'm going on top of everything on that dress to make everything come together and have another layer of depth. We only used one color marker. It was the lightest bluish gray marker that I had. You could use light gray, you could use ivory, you could use a very light sand color, you could even possibly use the lightest blue color that you can find. My recommendation is that you go to an actual art supply store and scribble on a piece of paper with each marker to see if you like the actual look of it, because sometimes you just can't tell when you look at the color that is on the actual pen itself. Now we're just going to do a silver, so you can choose whatever colored pencil matches your marker, but a very light silver matches my bluish gray marker. And we're going to go on top once again to add another layer of depth. Just very lightly use this colored pencil. Really soft. Touch those outer edges where we already have our lightish blue-gray marker. And be careful not to push too hard. Next is our colorless blender. We're just going to go right on top of everything once again, softening that very light touch of the colored pencil. Again, I have scratch paper on the side. Always clean it first before you put it onto your work. And I'm just very gently blending in that colored pencil. I'm softening over those patterns that I've created at that hemline as well. So that's going right on top of the correction pen. The colorless blender serves that purpose of wetting the surface area just enough so that the colors can start to blend and lift a little bit. And then when they blend and mold together, it creates a softer, almost like an airbrush effect. And there is truly a tiny bit of color in the colorless blender. It is not invisible. You can actually see a tiny hint of color. And so we have completed our bridal gown in the very, very light blue. We use that light blue marker, the colorless blender, and then a very light silver colored pencil. I'm just adding some details. She's standing in front of a throne, but I want the dress and the model to be the center stage, so that's why the throne doesn't have tons of details. I'm just adding a little bit to it. So I recommend that you play around with adding just a little bit of background, but make sure it doesn't take away from the model, because the croquis and the clothing is really the focus. Keep it simple, but push yourselves. Move a lot with creativity. Repeat your techniques over and over again, and you'll start to develop a mastery of them where you're able to move really quickly, because of course that is key for any fashion designer. I've enjoyed this tutorial with you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you and seeing all the great work that you're creating. Feel free to send me a picture on my Instagram at Coriosuna. I'd love to see it. And until we meet again in the next video, happy sketching.